The Rise and Shine podcast series is made possible by the generous support of Bonnie Vozar of Chicago, Illinois.
A household that is vegan is not a threat to your love of steak, and a household that chooses a different kind of school system does not imply that your choices are invalid. We focus on what unites us, not what divides us.
This is Rise and Shine, a podcast that offers timeless wisdom and uplifting meditations to fill your heart, feed your soul, and start your day on a positive note. Here is Adrienne Gold-Davis.
During the years where we actually have some sort of perceived control over where our kids go and who they spend their out-of-school time with, many of us have decided preferences for the sort of friends we want our kids to have. And this includes the kind of household those kids come from. One of the things my mother used to say whenever I lamented, this friend gets to do this, or that friend gets to eat this, or that place this friend gets to go to, I don't. I got the perennial shutdown phrase, when you live in our house, under our roof, you will abide by our rules. And I hated it. But today I see something. I see she was utterly respectful and actually fair, because my mother was a proponent of unity without uniformity long before it became a momentum catchphrase, because she didn't trash the choices of other parents. She didn't judge unfavorably households that had different rules. Then she did. I'm not so-and-so's mother. I'm your mother, she would say. And that was the end of the conversation. No trash talk, just total shutdown. By the way, in my house, you never touched my mother's purse either. You didn't open the refrigerator without asking first, and you never left the table without saying, please, may I leave the table? And dinner happened as a family. No questions, no exceptions, ever. Now, in my house, raising my boys, I have to admit, I allowed them to jump on the furniture. They used it as props. They had really imaginative games. But at my best friend's house, that was a punishable offense. Now, I raised my kids to be strictly kosher, but they went on play dates to homes where that wasn't even remotely on the radar. Sometimes, though, the problem becomes bigger than just the kids having to navigate differing rules in different houses. Sometimes the parents end up subtly bullying each other, openly disrespecting each other, making value judgments of one another, because just as kids struggle with not wanting to be different, adults do as well. It's just that they have more sophisticated ways of dealing with that discomfort. So, how do we navigate this dynamic as women aspiring to be role models and agents of peace and hope? Jewish wisdom weighs in heavily on being respectful of the privacy and differences within households. In Jewish law, called halacha, we learn this concept called hezek re'iyah. This is the damage that can be caused by looking or gazing into someone else's private space. For this reason, it was forbidden to build a house or a window or a balcony that directly overlooks a neighbor's private home or yard in a way that might infringe on their privacy. Now, this concept of hezek re'iyah is derived actually from Bilam. Now, Bilam was the non-Jewish prophet. He was hired to curse the Jewish people. And he recites that famous phrase, Ma tovu, how goodly are your tents, O Yaakov, your dwellings, O Israel. So what did Bilam see? Well, when he went to curse the Jews and he overlooked into their encampment, he saw that the Jews took care to make sure that the doorways of their houses didn't face each other, which allowed for privacy in each home. Jewish law says you can't look into someone else's dwelling, even if they're not at home. So, does this extend to not passing any judgment? Can I look at what's going on in order to protect my children while I still have the power and the ability to do so? And what about when you're invited into said house and you see behaviors and concepts that run at odds with your own values and standards? Okay, so naturally, there's going to be times to put your foot down. An asthmatic child is not going to go into a house filled with pets or secondhand smoke. And a teenager isn't going to be allowed to go to an unsupervised environment where underage drinking is allowed. Often, it is actually more instructive to teach your kids how to maintain the family standards, even when being faced with peers who are allowed to eat or do or behave differently than they are. And this is very difficult, especially for teens. Young kids say things really easy. I remember saying it myself, my mother doesn't let me. And they're not embarrassed to do that because they still see the mother as the post where they abide. They see themselves as extensions of their family and their family's laws. But teens, they struggle with anything that makes them stand out from their friends or from those they want to be friends with. And we can and should have compassion for that developmental stage and give them ways to save face while staying true to what they know is correct. Many families I know have these emergency codes or phrases that they text to each other if they find themselves in places where they're feeling unsafe or they know it's probably better they not be there. Codes and phrases, sometimes it's like orange, and that means you're supposed to call in 5 minutes and say, get home right now, right? Now, it's no less necessary in a different way for adult interaction because people become very invested in their choices and decisions. Any different choices can feel to the less secure like judgments and disapproval. And when we face differences up close, we are still obligated to treat the other with dignity and not risk embarrassing them. Lashon hara, gossip, evil speech, is often the result of the inability to process differences without ascribing judgment and negative intentions to the other. We talk about it because we can't tolerate the differences. And in doing so, we damage not just those we speak about, not just those who are listening to us, but also to ourselves. So here's some of my family's thought processes and mantras that form the way we choose to deal with these differences. The things we say to ourselves and to each other, and if necessary, to the person we're facing this with when we find ourselves far from our own ways of living. The first simple line: different house, different rules. If you internalize this not as a judgment of the other person, but rather an affirmation of every family's right to create an environment that furthers their own vision of what meaningful life looks like, then it can be said lightly and without negativity. People pick up on the undercurrents of your comments, and it's not a fake it till you make it thing. Understand truly that there are different rules in different houses, and that is normal because there's no better and there's no worse. A household that is vegan is not a threat to your love of steak, and a household where children co-sleep with their parents will not affect your bedtime rules. And a household that chooses a different kind of school system does not imply that your choices are invalid. The second, we just love how different we are, and yet how close we stay. Isn't it wonderful that there's so much unity between us despite our differences? We focus on what unites us, not what divides us. Instead of pretending everything is the same, you can name the differences to yourself, but instead search for the similarities to find common ground and to prevent us from causing danger by prying. When your kid comes home and says, at so-and-so's house, they get to eat junk food and drink soda, you don't see it as a threat to your values. You say to yourself and to your children, well, in that way, our households are very different. But what did you notice, honey, that reminded you of what we have in common? And then you might reiterate your position about, say, junk food and soda. You might say, just as every household is different, everyone manages their health differently. I feel that our decisions are the right one for our family. Now, these things may sound trivial, but they actually set the stage for the way your kids will handle the more important differences they see later in their teens when you won't be there to supervise or pick them up or say no for them. And they create permission for your kid to be different without othering the other family entirely. Having these words top of mind and tip of tongue is a reminder that rather than peeking where we're not invited to look, we can notice, affirm the differences, and know that that does not preclude love, respect, and closeness. Hezekiah gives our nation the ability to foster unity without uniformity, and that helps children feel permission to choose for themselves and not struggle so much with peer pressure. And that is a give that we give them and we give ourselves.
Thanks for listening to Rise and Shine. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Momentum Podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Join Adrienne again next time for more timeless wisdom and uplifting meditations that fill your heart, feed your soul, and start your day on a positive note.
This podcast was made possible by the generous support of Bonnie Vozar of Chicago, Illinois. Spread the wisdom. Inspire Jewish individuals around the globe by supporting Momentum's podcasts. To sponsor, contact podcast@momentumunlimited.org. You're listening to a Momentum podcast. For unlimited inspiration, wisdom, and empowerment, visit momentumunlimited.org.